Welcome to StarWatch Now, your front row seat to all the hottest gossip, drama, and breaking news from the world of entertainment. If it's trending, shocking, or star-studded, we're covering it. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
I didn't expect 9 quiet images to stop the internet. Not because they were loud or glamorous or engineered to impress. They didn't shout for attention. They didn't demand admiration. They simply appeared almost accidentally, and yet they refused to let people scroll past. At first glance, there was nothing obvious to praise. No dramatic styling, no exaggerated emotion, no familiar narrative to hold on to. And that was precisely what unsettled viewers. People lingered, stared, zoomed in, scrolled back up, and then looked again. Something felt different, but it was hard to explain why. The longer you watched, the harder it became to label what you were seeing. Was it strength or softness? Distance or openness? Control or ease? These images didn't give answers. They created a pause. And in today's world, where everything competes to be consumed in seconds, a pause is rare. That pause turned into curiosity. Curiosity turned into discussion. Discussion turned into quiet fascination. And before anyone realized what was happening, those 9 images were everywhere. Not because they told a story, but because they refused to tell one. And once that question formed in the viewer's mind, there was no easy way to let it go. What made this moment so compelling wasn't novelty. It was restraint. In an environment saturated with filters, captions, and carefully constructed personas, these images felt stripped back to something more basic. The lighting was cool, the textures left intact, the details unpolished. You could see pores, shadows, lines created by natural movement. Instead of inviting admiration, the camera observed. Instead of performing, the subject existed. Each image stood on its own, yet they quietly echoed one another, like fragments of a conversation that never fully reveals its meaning. In one frame, the expression was distant, almost guarded, as if the world was being watched from a safe place. In another, there was a softness that felt spontaneous and unprotected. The contrast was striking, but it wasn't dramatic in a theatrical sense. It felt human, and that humanity is what unsettled people the most. Traditionally, celebrity imagery tells you how to feel. The gaze is direct, the posture is controlled, the message is clear. These images rejected that formula. Eyes were hidden, faces were partially obscured. Sometimes the subject avoided the camera altogether. This deliberate incompleteness did something powerful. It activated the viewer. People weren't just looking, they were searching, trying to understand what was being withheld. The absence became the focal point. In psychology, the mind naturally tries to fill in gaps. When information is missing, attention increases. These images understood that instinct without exploiting it. They didn't tease or provoke. They simply left space. That space allowed different interpretations to coexist. Some saw calm. Others saw tension. Some felt closeness. Others sensed distance. None of these readings were corrected or denied, and that is where the real shift happened. For once, the audience was not guided toward a single emotional conclusion. They were trusted to arrive at their own. In doing so, viewers stopped being passive consumers and became participants. They weren't reacting to a message, they were forming one. The styling choices reinforced this quiet disruption. Traditional markers of masculinity were softened, not erased, but rebalanced. Structured pieces were paired with gentler colors. Textures replaced sharp contrasts. The result wasn't androgyny, nor was it defiance. It was freedom. A suggestion that strength doesn't need to announce itself, and confidence doesn't require constant proof. Emotion wasn't framed as weakness. Silence wasn't framed as absence. Everything existed without explanation, and that refusal to explain felt radical. Even the environments told a story by refusing to be one. No grand sets, no iconic landmarks, no visual clutter. Some images felt enclosed and intimate, others open and almost empty. Together, they suggested movement without direction, presence without performance. In an industry where visibility is often tied to excess, this simplicity stood out. It felt intentional, almost meditative, as if stepping away from noise had become a statement in itself. Perhaps the most striking aspect was what was missing entirely. There were no relational cues, no hints of family, friendship, or romance. No emotional backstory offered to frame the images. The subject was detached from narrative and placed alone with the viewer. This isolation didn't create distance. It created clarity. Without context, the focus shifted to posture, breath, and expression, to the subtle ways a person occupies space when no role is being played. And that kind of presence is rare. The timing amplified everything. Audiences are increasingly fatigued by perfection. Filters blur individuality. Algorithms reward familiarity. These images moved in the opposite direction. They resisted classification. They couldn't be reduced to a type or a trend. That resistance slowed people down, and slowing down in a fast-moving digital environment is disruptive. What followed was not outrage or hype, but conversation. People shared their interpretations. They debated what felt honest, what felt new, and why these images stayed in their minds long after viewing. The images didn't ask to be defended or praised. They invited reflection. And reflection, unlike excitement, doesn't fade quickly. In the end, these 9 images didn't redefine aesthetics by offering something louder or more extreme. They did it by removing excess, by trusting stillness, by allowing contradiction. They suggested that presence itself can be enough, that identity doesn't need to be fixed, that beauty doesn't need to be explained, and that perhaps the future of public image lies not in telling people who you are, but in allowing them to sit with who you might be. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that quiet pause while listening, that moment of reflection rather than reaction, then you already understand why it mattered. Here on StarWatch Now, we look beyond headlines and hype to explore the moments that subtly shift how we see culture, identity, and the people at the center of it all. If you enjoy thoughtful storytelling that stays with you long after the video ends, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming stories. Thank you for spending these moments with us, for listening closely, and for being part of a community that values depth over noise. Until next time, keep watching, keep questioning, and we'll see you again on StarWatch Now.